My grandmother left me a $2 million house on one condition: divorce my husband within 30 days. What she didn't know, what none of us knew, was that the name written in that will wasn't legally his. And when my uncle found that out before I did, he didn't tell me the truth. He tried to use it to take the house for himself. I'm Emily. I'm 34 years old, I teach third grade, and until 8 months ago, I thought my biggest problem in life was convincing 9-year-olds that cursive still matters. Then my grandmother died, and I found out that families don't fall apart the moment someone passes. They fall apart in the weeks after, when the will gets read out loud. My husband's name is Ryan. He's 36, he owns a small auto repair shop 2 towns over, and he is, without exaggeration, the steadiest person I have ever known. He shows up, he remembers things. He fixed my mother's transmission for free the year she couldn't afford rent, and never once brought it up again. I fell in love with him because he was solid in a way nobody else in my life had ever been. My grandmother, Diane, never saw it that way. To her, Ryan was the mechanic. Not my husband, not a good man, just a guy with grease under his nails who, in her mind, would never be enough. I used to think it was snobbery, plain and simple. It wasn't, not exactly. My grandmother had watched my mother marry a man with nothing, watched that marriage collapse under money problems and resentment, watched my mother cry at her kitchen table more nights than I can count. Grandma Diane decided somewhere in there that love without financial security was just a slow-motion disaster. She never forgave Ryan for reminding her of that. It wasn't cruelty. It was scary wearing a very expensive dress. Still, on the surface, things were fine. Holidays were tense, but survivable. Grandma tolerated Ryan at Thanksgiving. She sent Christmas cards addressed to both of us, even if her voice went flat every time she said his name. I told myself that was as good as it was going to get, and honestly, I'd made my peace with it. I had my husband, I had my job. I didn't need my grandmother's approval to be happy. Then she passed in March, and 2 weeks later, my Uncle Mark called a family meeting to read the will. Mark is my mother's older brother, and he's also, conveniently, a lawyer, the one who helped Grandma draft her estate documents years ago. He'd always positioned himself as the responsible one in the family, the one who handled things. I used to be grateful for that. I didn't know yet how much that role gave him access to. We all sat in Grandma's living room, the one with the good china cabinet nobody was ever allowed to touch. And Mark read through the will in that careful, professional voice lawyers use when they want you to feel like nothing unusual is happening. The house went to me. That part felt like a gift, like Grandma had finally quietly chosen me the way I'd always wanted her to. Then came the condition. The house, worth just over $2 million, would only pass to me if I divorced my husband within 30 days of the reading. If I didn't, the house would be sold and the proceeds would go to a charitable foundation Grandma had set up years ago, one focused on financial literacy for young women. I remember laughing, actually laughing, because it sounded like something out of a soap opera. Then I looked at Mark's face, and he wasn't laughing. Neither was my mother. It was real. I sat there in that living room holding Ryan's hand under the coffee table so nobody would see how hard I was gripping it, and I thought, this is insane. My grandmother from beyond the grave was asking me to choose between the man I loved and $2 million, and she'd given me exactly 30 days to decide. The first few days after the reading, I told myself I wouldn't even entertain it. Ryan and I talked about it that same night, and he said something I'll never forget. I don't need you to prove anything to me. But I also don't want you to resent me for a house you never got. So don't make this decision based on what you think I want to hear. That's who he is. Even in the middle of his own humiliation, he was worried about protecting me. But families don't let things go quietly, especially not when $2 million is sitting on the table. Within a week, my mother started calling, not to comfort me, to persuade me. Your grandmother wasn't perfect, but she loved you enough to set you up for life. Are you really going to throw that away over pride? Pride. That's the word she used. like my marriage was a stubborn streak instead of a life I'd built on purpose. My aunt chimed in next, gentler but somehow worse. Nobody's saying you have to stay divorced forever, sweetheart. Do what you need to do for 30 days, sort the paperwork out, and then live your life. As if a marriage were a permit you could suspend and renew. As if Ryan wouldn't feel every second of that betrayal, paperwork, or not. I tried to explain, calmly, at first, that I wasn't going to divorce my husband for a house, no matter how much it was worth. I thought the reason would work. It didn't. Every conversation looped back to the same place. Grandma clearly had her reasons. Grandma always saw further ahead than the rest of us. Grandma wouldn't have done this without cause. Nobody asked whether the condition itself was cruel. They only asked why I was resisting it. Ryan, for his part, tried to stay out of the family conversations entirely. He didn't want to be the guy causing division at the Sunday dinners that were somehow still happening, like everything was normal. But I could see it wearing on him the way people who used to hug him hello now gave him this careful, sympathetic nod, like he was a complication to be managed instead of a person in the room. About 2 weeks in, my Uncle Mark asked to meet me alone, to go over some estate logistics. I assumed it was paperwork. It wasn't. He sat across from me at his office, laptop open, voice smooth in that way that made me realize, for the first time, that Mark was not neutral in any of this. He suggested gently, like it was my idea, and he was just being helpful that I could file for divorce now, satisfy the condition on paper, secure the house, and revisit the marriage question once everything settled. He called it protecting the asset. He called Ryan the variable. Not my husband, a variable. I remember staring at him and asking why he was so insistent on this particular solution, when there were other paths contesting the will, negotiating with the foundation, anything. He said contesting would take years and cost more than the house was worth, and that the foundation would never negotiate. He said it like a man who had already thought through every angle. I didn't understand yet why he'd thought through so many angles for a will he claimed he'd just drafted on Grandma's instructions. I told him no. Flatly, finally, no. I wasn't filing for divorce, not even on paper, not even temporarily. Mark's face did something small and tight, something I didn't understand at the time, and he said, "Then I hope you're prepared to lose the house, Emily. Some of us actually care what happens to this family's future." I left that office angrier than I'd been in years, but also, for the first time, suspicious. Something about how hard he was pushing didn't sit right. That suspicion sent me digging. I hired my own attorney the following week, a woman named Patricia who specialized in estate disputes, mostly because I wanted someone in my corner who wasn't related to me by blood or by billable hours to Mark. I handed her the will. I told her everything, the condition, the 30 days, Mark's strange eagerness for a quiet, fast divorce. Patricia went through the document line by line, and about 20 minutes in, she stopped and read one section 3 times before she looked up at me. The will didn't say Ryan Whitfield, it said Ryan Callahan. Callahan. Ryan's father's name, the man Ryan had legally cut ties with at 22, changing his last name to his mother's maiden name, Whitfield, after his father's second arrest for fraud. Grandma had known Ryan for 12 years. She had sent Christmas cards to Ryan Whitfield. She had complained endlessly about Ryan Whitfield, the mechanic. But somewhere in the legal drafting of her will, the name attached to the divorce condition was his old, discarded, legally abandoned name. Not the man I was actually married to. Patricia explained it slowly, the way lawyers do when they know the words are about to change everything. Legally, the condition named a person who did not exist under that identity anymore. Ryan Callahan hadn't been Ryan's legal name in over a decade. The condition, as written, was unenforceable, not because it was unethical, but because it was administratively broken. It didn't attach to my actual marriage at all. I asked her the obvious question. Did Mark know? Patricia pulled the drafting file Mark's office was required to share during probate. Buried in an email chain from 4 months before Grandma died, Mark had flagged the naming discrepancy to Grandma directly, calling it a small clerical detail we should probably fix before finalizing. Grandma apparently never got around to it or didn't think it mattered, but Mark knew. He'd known the condition might be void from the very beginning, months before she passed, and he never said a word to me. Instead, once she died, he'd spent weeks pushing me toward a real divorce to satisfy, a condition that, as written, wasn't even legally attached to my marriage. I sat with that for a long time. Mark wasn't protecting Grandma's wishes. He was protecting an outcome where the will's charitable clause never had to be tested, where the mess stayed murky enough that, if I divorced or hesitated long enough, the estate might end up in a prolonged dispute, one where, as executor, he'd have control over the property and its finances the entire time. A man that was patient about logistics wasn't being careless. He was buying himself leverage. Something shifted in me after that. I stopped feeling defensive and started feeling clear. I wasn't going to spend one more day negotiating my marriage like it was a bargaining chip in someone else's plan. Patricia and I built our case fast, the drafting emails, the legal name change documents from 12 years ago, an affidavit from the attorney who'd handled Ryan's original name change. We requested a formal probate hearing before the 30-day window closed, specifically to challenge the condition's validity and to name Mark's prior knowledge on the record. Ryan didn't say much when I told him everything. He just sat very still for a second, then asked one quiet question. "So he knew this the whole time and let everyone treat me like the reason you might lose your inheritance?" I nodded. He didn't get angry the way I expected. He got calm in that focused way he gets right before he fixes something that's been broken for a long time. The hearing happened on day 28 in a small probate courtroom that smelled like old carpet and coffee, with my mother, my aunt, and Mark all sitting stiffly in the same row. Patricia laid it out clean and simple. The will's divorce condition named a legal identity that had not existed for over a decade, making the condition void as written. Then she introduced the email. The one where Mark told my grandmother about the naming issue 4 months before she died, and never mentioned it to anyone else since. You could feel the room shift. My mother's head turned slowly toward her brother. Mark tried to explain it away. A minor oversight, not material. I didn't think it was relevant, but the judge asked him directly whether he understood, as the estate's own attorney, that the discrepancy could invalidate the condition. He hesitated. That hesitation said everything his words tried not to. I stood up when the judge gave me the floor, and I said the one thing I'd been holding on to for weeks. My grandmother spent her whole life afraid that love without money falls apart. I'm not here because I'm afraid of that. I'm here because I refuse to let someone turn her fear into a weapon against my marriage. Patricia told me afterward that she saw 2 jurors, no jury, just observers in the gallery actually nod. Mark didn't look at me once. The judge ruled that the divorce condition, as written, was legally unenforceable due to the identity discrepancy, and that the house would pass to me under the will's general bequest, no strings attached. Mark's role as executor was also formally reviewed for conflict of interest, given his documented prior knowledge. That review is still ongoing, but he's since stepped back from handling the rest of the estate. The house is mine now. Ryan and I moved in 2 months ago. We kept Grandma's china cabinet, mostly because I still don't have the heart to sell anything of hers, even after everything. My mother apologized. Eventually, in her own limited way, she said she didn't know Mark had hidden the discrepancy. And maybe that's true. My aunt still thinks I got lucky with a technicality, which tells you everything about how she saw my marriage the whole time. Mark and I haven't spoken since the hearing. Ryan still goes to the shop every morning, still comes home with grease under his nails, still doesn't bring up the 12,000 things he could have said about how this family treated him for 4 months. I asked him once if he was angry at Grandma. He said no, just sad that she spent her whole life scared of the wrong thing. So here's my question for you. Was I wrong to fight this instead of just letting the house go, keeping the peace and avoiding the family fallout? Or was I right to dig in, even knowing it would blow up a relationship with my uncle for good? If this kept you hooked, hit like, drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my shoes, and subscribe because tomorrow I've got another story. And trust me, it's just as messy as this one.